I remember seeing this profile here on this writer, Mark Richard, who made mention of his mentor, Gordon Lish. And it was the first time seeing that name, and I got intrigued, so I special ordered Richard's first short story collection here. But there seemed to be something off about it, like it was just cut too close to the bone and was hanging on by a thread in order to bring up something raw, but it was at the risk of the whole thing falling apart. Y'all ever do this number where you see the places they've been published? I noticed one of them was the Quarterly. That's a magazine that Gordon Lish edited, so I went and found a copy, and I was shocked to see, though, that he would return your manuscript within 1 week of receiving it. At that point, it was like, game over. And the highlight of the day, the dopamine hit back then, was going out to the mailbox and seeing all the rejection letters come back, until one day you check the mail. So much trial and error, it became kind of like this one-way correspondence class, which you could eventually figure out his reading tastes and the measuring sticks, which he was expecting you to surpass, which of course it was inhumanly impossible, especially with this author here, whom he had shoved into the ear of his buddy, who included him in his appendix here famously. This person, probably the most notable proponent of McCarthy. But this book marked the end of Lish's friendship with Bloom, when Bloom had neglected to include some of Lish's own buddies here. McCarthy demonstrating Bloom's concept of reverse influence, where at first it seemed like it was Faulkner that seemed to loom large over McCarthy, but we might look at it differently 100 or 500 years from now and see that it was McCarthy all along that was influencing his precursor backwards in time. In a similar way, Gordon Lish preached a more zoomed-in kind of anxiety of influence, where it was about each sentence kind of twisting and turning and exploding the sentence that came before it with this constant, what he called consecution. And it's like the workshop in which he taught, where through his actual speech, he would demonstrate that method, and he would monologue for hours, just searching and circling. But what if the traumatic events in the lives of his students were limited to only things like getting rejection letters from literary magazines? Some were happy to get slapped around and even chopped up in half in some cases, amazingly. And others were fully formed already, like even to the point of inspiring him and being like, fuck off, creep. You could even pick out his voice in the already established as well. I think waving his pen around was sort of like this power move where he was pissing on people. Honestly, though, I think some should have been more grateful. You didn't mind getting molded a little bit, even if it meant sounding sort of the same as the others. As long as what you brought up to the page was the deepest, darkest stuff, sort of like this Scientology move. But how do you go darker without letting loose that worst secret of all? That your sentences are just too small. They kind of slide and get lost. Deep down, you're always living in fear. Waking up every morning with a smile on your face, always looking out for new ways of expression. The more alien, the better, and it's like putting up this bird feeder in the backyard with strange seeds and watching all these amazing birds come flock to you and get transformed and speak your voice through them as they're singing just for you. Figure over the years people would recognize you more for your own work, which, although not the easiest to consume, it definitely went on its own unique direction, but it got to the point where something was off. Either people weren't getting with the program or you just had a screw loose. Well then, why not just double down and showcase that loose screw even more, when flexing the imagination and doing all this research and reportage just doesn't compare to the beauty of the words themselves, where the shapes and sounds and colors of them are like these precious metals that you can just play around with. It was like being drunk and draping that language over whatever. It didn't really matter, so in that case, why not just raw dog it and tell it like it is? In fact, that's part of the fun, is to just play around with what's real and what's made up, just messing with the reader. But then why not go even farther and pervert the calling altogether? You kind of had to, because the muse just held too much power, but that could cause some real collateral damage. But then this memory hits, and it was back in the day when what you'd created had flowed together nicely, but there was that one that had gone too far, just calling out what you were afraid to admit the most. How you couldn't go as deep as possible because there were just too many other black holes to slide into. Even though she was at home still trying to inspire you, like as much as she could, it didn't matter anyways because you could barely keep your pen up anymore. And when you could, it was always just leading you astray. Now you see her everywhere. You can even feel her inside you, still whispering to you. That's when you start to taste the world as she once did. Like whatever you can imagine, she immediately feels. That's when Gordon Lish calls you on the phone. It's as if he somehow knew and invites you to his class. But nah, you're good. Can't really write anymore. I'm only just a reader now. I'll just be the muse for others as punishment for having failed my own.
You'll come apart and you'll go.